Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Great to be here. Can I do this? There we go. Oh, here come the latecomers. Oh, jeez. Okay, I've been asked to introduce Brian Swimme. I've known Brian a long time. Hi, everyone. Mike, did you want to say anything? Or? No? It depends on the person. Of course I would love to sign them. Yeah. Took me 11 years to write it, so. That's it. Hi, everyone. Hi. The real challenge is the title. Who knows the title of our gathering? Cosmology? Okay. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Now I know what you were like in grade school. I know exactly. I could tell. I could tell. So this is okay. This is a presentation based on the idea that that we're in the midst of a very fundamental transition. It's not the first by any means. There have been a number of major transitions in the human story, but and each of them is unique. And I'm fascinated by studying them. It just amazes me. Like one of them, just to throw one out. And I do talk about this in the book, but the trying to figure out why humans went into caves for such a long period of time. Like in Europe, certainly for 40,000 years, but there are places in southern Africa where it looks like 115,000 years. Now, some of them lived in caves, but I'm not talking about those caves. I'm talking about the caves that were hostile to life. They were, there's no food, no sexual mates. Well, if you leave those two out, that sort of takes care of Darwinian explanations. That isn't why they went there, right? So that to understand it from a strictly Darwinian standpoint, you'd have to ask, well, how did this enhance survival of value? And you have to really get into how difficult it was to get to these caves. How many people have claustrophobia? Okay, now we really know, because these caves were like half a mile straight down. In the dark, you had your little torch, but they went out. There were some tough times, yes. While you were still sane? That's a long time ago. Yeah, no. And I would think I would even go insane if I were trapped in this. I mean, the point is, they would crawl on their backs for literally days to get down to these places. And they didn't live there. Why would they keep doing this for 100,000 years? So one interpretation, which I really love, I think it's accurate, is Alberto. I was waiting for you to introduce me, but I know you wanted an entrance. I'm so glad. No, just so. I was doing a miserable job of it, believe me. What? My friend Alberto.
I hope I won't do a miserable job myself right now. Okay, first of all, thank you everybody for coming. I want to thank my friend Brian. I also want to thank Unity Church for offering the place. So myself, I am the coordinator of the group called Diablo Ions. And let me explain. I'm going to be brief. First of all, I want you to know you won't have to listen too long for me. I want to clarify that. So I'm a coordinator of Diablo Ions. What is Diablo Ions? It's a community group that is associated, not part of, but associated with the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And what is the Institute of Noetic Sciences? Many people may not know. It's an organization founded by a famous astronaut. I don't remember the name right now. Edward, thank you. Edward Mitchells. And the purpose of this organization is show that science alone is not enough to explain the universe. Science, there is science that's very important. I'm not saying science is not important, but there is another dimension, a spiritual dimension, that is essential. And unfortunately, mainstream science it ignores that. Basically, it's about the physical universe. So noetic sciences, like my friend Brian Swimme, both of us believe, like in Unity, that there is a spiritual dimension also. So I'm going to mention briefly what noetic science has done to show the spiritual dimension. I still can't believe that people don't believe that. People just are close-minded about that. Okay. For instance, precognition, telepathy, remote viewing. All these things happen in the realm of another dimension, not in the physical dimension. Okay? Prayer works. It has been documented. But many people think this is just mysticism and nothing more than that. Noetic sciences has documented that and show through experiments that works. So you don't have to have blind faith. Okay? Is that clear? I want to be as clear as possible. And noetic sciences has also shown the noosphere that Brian talks about is also a real thing. I'm going to tell you why. When there are circumstances where the whole humanity, or most of it, is focused into something, they're synchronized into something, like when 9/11 happened, there is a device called random number generators. These are electronic devices, nothing more than that. And they produce random numbers. Okay? Now, during the 9/11, or even before it happened, that's interesting, before it happened, the random number generators, all of them, started to show some synchronization, something totally different than random numbers. They were influenced by the consciousness of humanity. So that shows you that there is a connection, okay, between global consciousness or global consciousness is real, okay? Prayer. Well, how do you explain prayer that it works without believing in global, there is another consciousness, another dimension, okay? So I want to introduce what noetic sciences has done scientifically with many experiments, mainly by Dean Radin, but other scientists too. Now, about Brian, he's going to tell you how the Big Bang, it didn't happen randomly. You want to mention that? Yeah. Yeah. So how the Big Bang occurred, it has to occur in a precise manner, or else there would be no stars. So it has to be very precise. So that shows, in my opinion, that there was some kind of intervention, some intelligent force intervened, because by chance, that doesn't happen. The universe would have started in the Big Bang just by chance, because the probability of having that situation, that expansion, that the rate of expansion is impossible. So it's a miracle. Is this working? Yeah. Can people hearing me? Okay. Thank you. Okay, I don't want to overdo it. I just want to say what we know for facts, not a matter of faith. It's facts. Okay. Okay. So Brian's focus is evolution. And he also talks about the noosphere, who is the same area is the same location where the random number generators are working, the same location. He talks about mind. Well, this has to do with the consciousness, but it's connected, okay? So Brian believes in evolution. He believes that there is another dimension that is spiritual, like we do, okay? And let me see, what else I need to say. Yes, sir. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say. So please welcome Brian.
Thank you, Alberto. Thank you. It was very good. Very good. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Alberto. Thank you so much. Yes. So, going back to those people down in the caves, they've been 100,000 years. They keep going down there. And one interpretation is that it was a process of awakening a power of mind that did not exist previously. And psychologists call this conscious recall. It's also called the reproductive imagination. And it consists of the ability to bring to consciousness a previous event and to reflect upon that. So, for instance, I can remember the first time I fell down on my bike as a kid. Scraped my knee. I can bring that back. And likewise, we could go through and imagine all the different things we can just bring back. And that ability was generated, again, the interpretation goes, in the caves. And just try to imagine it. This is what I've done. I've tried to imagine being there with them. And so it's dark. You have you have some flames going, so you have this flickering going on, and then you're watching one of your own make squiggly marks on the wall, and involving a saliva, and that's what they're doing. They're making these little marks, and you're there. You're watching this, and then the moment comes when suddenly there's a horse in the cave. Not there physically, but it's there in awareness. And this transition, when I say squiggly marks, it starts off just squiggly marks, but then suddenly, whoa, there's this leap in consciousness of getting that it's a horse. And they are experiencing it together. So that suddenly, your friend, they're going, whoa, a horse too. So you're both realizing what's taking place inside. Something's taking place inside that you're sharing in common. And that ability to express an inner feeling and then have it become public, that is the divide. That's one divide from the other apes and humans. Imagine, just to get a feel for this, imagine you were a wildebeest, and you're out on the savannas by yourself, for whatever reason, and you're attacked by some lionesses. And it's a bad situation, but you figure out how to escape. You got damaged and so forth, claws, but nevertheless you did something. You did some kind of a move. You frightened them, or who knows what it was, but you escaped. Now you come back to the wildebeest herd, all right, and they get that you're in pain. They can see the blood, and they can feel the emotional shudders. But you can't tell them. You can't tell them what just happened. And it's, first of all, not only is there this gulf between your experience and what they know, there's also a gulf between the ability to accumulate knowledge. So that the wildebeest has this great idea, can't transmit it. Where humans found a way to capture in symbols the insights they'd learned. And so they expanded in their knowledge generation after generation, as opposed to the other apes and other primates and other mammals who would advance in knowledge through genetic mutation. With humans, that wasn't necessary. So at a certain point, we stopped going down into those caves. Why? Again, the interpretation. Because we had brought the ability of conscious recall into our culture and could transmit it to our children on a regular basis without their having to go down into the cave. Now, so this would be one transformation humanity has undergone. Now, we all have reproductive imagination. And there would be others we could go through. But the whole point of my presentation and discussion with you here is to suggest that we are in the midst of one of those moments. I can't resist. One more example, just to throw it out there. So you have two. Is when we broke through from awareness to self-conscious awareness. I mean, our awareness of colors and of emotions is very similar to all other mammals. They experience the same kind of fright and sadness and excitement. But with humans, there is an added dimension to that. There's the experience of all this, and there's the awareness that I am a self having this experience. So consciousness then folds back on itself, and then we become self-aware. Now, obviously, when did this take place? We can't say for certain, but we can look at the symbolic record. And one of the first, not the first, but one of the first humans to express in language self-awareness was Zarathustra. Now, we don't know exactly when he lived. The guesses are a little bit wild, but it may be 3,000 years ago, maybe 4,000 years ago. But Zarathustra was the first one to not only express his understanding that he was a self speaking the words of God. All the previous poets and seers and mystics, they would speak of the God says this, the God said that. They weren't in the equation. But for Zarathustra, he recognized he was in a dialogue with other forces, other beings that he called God. The reason Zarathustra is identified as the transition in this evocation of another power is because he not only expressed awareness of consciousness folding back on himself, he had a method for enabling others to experience it as well. And so that, by having a method, it spread. All right, and just like I said with the caves were the method, right? There were certainly other moments when humans had conscious recall, but the caves and the art, that was a way for humanity as a whole. So the speculation I want us to reflect on is simple to say, and it's that we are right now in the midst of a major transformation of human consciousness, and it's appearing. My guess is it's sparking in everyone in different ways, right? But because we haven't yet identified it, we don't notice it. But when this is one of the things that Carl Jung celebrated, that the development of a human, in a certain sense, is ongoing and inevitable. But when you bring consciousness into it, it's accelerated. So then suddenly you realize, you start to you connect the dots, and you go, I get it. I'm really paranoid, or whatever it might be, you know. But it's that meta level. You suddenly understand yourself in a bigger way. So now I use the phrase noospheric consciousness. The other phrase I've used is time developmental consciousness. And the third one is planetary consciousness. These are just attempts to throw out, like it's gesturing towards something. I don't know what noospheric consciousness is, and I don't know what time developmental consciousness is. I have a few insights. And the reason, my hope in discussing this with you is that as we generate this dialogue and conversation, we will, like Alberto was saying, we will bring the power of the collective into this work. The very fact that you're in the room suggests to me that it's already happening in your life, and on some intuitive level, you're interested in it. Now, what I was going to do was to ask each and every one of you, what would you say your search is now? What are you searching for now? And then I was going to ask, what comes into your mind when you hear the phrase, a major transformation of human consciousness? I wanted to kind of generate that feeling, and they'd be so different. Everybody would have a certain kind of thing to say. So I say it out loud just so you can perhaps reflect on that. What I'm going to talk about are my own steps toward what I think is something like a noospheric consciousness. I'm hoping at best to articulate something that connects with one of your experiences or one of your insights. And what I'm calling this, another phrase is, I think this is an invention of a new artistic and literary genre called auto-cosmology, meaning it's a combination of autobiography and cosmology. In a way, it could even be called the autobiography of humanity, even though it sounds grandiose, but it's trying to find our way into a territory that is unknown and not talked about. I think it will be increasingly. I'm convinced in the room there are a number of autocosmologists that just haven't yet identified themselves as such. But so my little pathway is a way of I hope generating resonant insights in you. So the first story I want to tell you, all stories, is when I first became a professor, I was asked to be part of a panel addressing the first year students. And so there was somebody from literature, somebody from chemistry, and myself from mathematics. And the idea was to give the first year students a sense of research and what the intellectual life was about. And so Professor Morrow got up and spoke first about Hesiod, and the Greek poet that had poems about the birth of light, the birth of humanity. But it was especially the reflection on light. Hesiod called it, I think, I don't know, I'm not a scholar on that, primal light, so the first light. And Hesiod claimed that the primal light is a god. So that's the nature of light. And then so Professor Morrow from the classics department said, this is unavailable to us because in the modern mind, there are no Greek divinities in the universe. So that it's impossible to really appreciate what Hesiod is saying about primal light. And I never forget the analogy. She said, to try to understand, for you to try to understand Hesiod's poetry is like an ant trying to learn calculus. I mean, it's kind of harsh, but I mean, pretty harsh, yeah, pretty harsh. But but I was so fascinated. I was so fascinated by what she said because I had prepared a little, 5-minute presentation of my work, hoping to investigate the initial singularity of space-time. Let me say a few words about that. The initial singularity of space-time. So singularity is a word in science, mathematics, used to talk about when the equations break down. And Einstein's equations for the large-scale structure of the universe would break down if you pushed back into the past too far. At some point, because the equations are showing matter coming closer and closer together. And so what you end up getting is a situation where the density of matter goes to infinity. Well, that doesn't make any sense. If it's matter, it's a finite density. So then it's simply said it's a singularity. And it's called an initial singularity because there's not a one previous to that. So it's like a fantastic discovery. And scientists, mathematicians, and cosmologists thrilled by this idea that and then the notion is if all of the matter in the universe is coming together, right? We have discovered the birthplace of the universe. So this is where it all started. And so the initial singular space-time is we have information about it because of the light that is released near the initial singularity. So I'm sitting there listening about Hesiod the poet talking about light as being a god, and I'm about to give my little thing on how I'm thinking about it mathematically, but I stopped, and I realized I didn't know what I realized. I'll tell you what I realized in a second, but in the moment I just thought, I've got to tell them what we've discovered. And I said, we are examining the primal light that Hesiod's talking about. We actually are in contact with it. And I said, if you just hold your hands together like this, like you're scooping water, every instant there are around 7,000 particles of light from the beginning of time. I was all fired up. I was just like, in other words, it was coming to me what we discovered. I have goosebumps now, even talking about it. It's bizarre. But it was thinking about it through the point of view of Hesiod, a poet, right? It took this poet talking about the birth of the universe for me to realize that what we discovered was something really amazing. It wasn't just a really fancy mathematical, anyway. I was split, is what I'm trying to suggest. I had the mathematical knowledge, but I hadn't yet integrated it. And so in a general sense, what I'm saying is, we, in the modern period, have an immense amount of knowledge about the universe, but our lives are not aligned with that knowledge. We're living out of kilter with what we know. And it's this, so then the transformation that I'm wondering about with you is, how do we take in and feel the universe we've discovered, as opposed to talk about and know the universe we've discovered? And then so, just to finish my little story on that, I walked back. When I was done, I was like, I don't know what the word is. I was in an altered state. And so I walked back, and I thought that students would be thrilled to learn this. I said, we're studying this light. We discovered it, 14 years ago, the 1978, 1964, we discovered it. 14 years ago, we discovered it. We've been looking at it. In the biggest mystery for scientists is to really get in touch with this and the 7,000 bits and all that. And then I stopped and nothing. And so then I turned around and I started walking back to my place. And then the applause started. There was a big gap, right? And then I sat down and I could barely... I tried to drink some water, I spilled it on myself. And Professor Morrow leaned over and she said, was that an act of cunning or confusion? And I said, what? What? Your meta-narrative. My what? Science über alles. And then I didn't even know what the words meant. But it was. She found it offensive, and she said that. Were you offended by the fact that I brought up a poet? And I said nothing, and she smiled and patted me on the hand and said, "We need to have a conversation." But it was this. I was awakening to the split condition in which I lived. Right? I wasn't even able to live the knowledge I was teaching. So the word revelation it's a powerful word, but what does it mean? What does revelation mean? Humans humans have been guided by revelation from the beginning. So revelation is an encounter with such depth that one organizes one's life around it. It becomes the foundation of one's life. And so in the West we have, and there are a variety, I don't know how many, but there are many, many different kinds of revelation. One of them would be the verbal, so that what comes out of the Bible. And then, like, so when a prophet says, "Thus saith the Lord," I mean, the prophet knows that the words are being spoken by him. He knows that he's speaking the words, but there's also something more going on in the words, right? And so that's the revelatory aspect. Another form of revelation would be the human history. So Exodus. Exodus is just a group of people traveling from one part of Africa to another. That's it. But it's more than just that. And it's that whatever is that extra thing is so. But the most common form of revelation in the human story is that still very much alive with indigenous groups. It's the universe as revelation. It's the universe. So that what I'm talking about, or trying to talk about, is the light I'm talking about is just light, and the stars are just stars. And yet they're revealing something very fundamental about what it means to be human. And so we have been, like, this massive avalanche of knowledge has come down upon us over the last 4 centuries, and we haven't really. We are now attempting to integrate it, and that's what I'm here trying to do as well, trying to take on this. It's amazing what we've learned. It's just like it keeps coming, but. Now we begin to see that we have a new narrative account of where we came from, and even why we're here. Another way to say that is we're beginning to discover some of the resonance of humanity's existence with the dynamics of the universe. And think of how different that is than the 1920s and the French existentialism, that we're just an absurdity in the universe. And this the same type of the universe is nothing but, that it's random, it's meaningless. That is melting away as we find a fundamental coherence in the universe. So then the question is, what is? I just said, I used the word revelation, and I said the universe as revelatory. And so I wanted to, like in a minute, tell you where this revelation came from in the human world. So it's the first person is Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein's field equations, they're called, are used all around the planet by cosmologists that are studying the large-scale structure of the universe. So in a certain sense, we want to say this. Einstein is the person this revelation came flooding in from. But the problem is, when the equations, when they came through and he was writing them down and looked at them and so forth, what they revealed was too much for him to handle. Einstein's the greatest scientist in 1,000 years, right? So when I say this is too much for him to handle, I don't want to come across like thinking I know more than he does. I mean, this guy was amazing. He was happy to think of time and space and mass as all relative, and he had an incredible imagination. But when his equation spoke of a universe expanding, that was too much for him because there was no evidence of the universe expanding. As Alberto brought up, this expansion of the universe was right there in his equations. Now, before we leave him, I just want you to reflect for just like half a minute on how Einstein could have come up with the equations that predicted the expansion of the universe when no one knew anything about it. Now he was interviewed by psychologists who studied the process of Giesland was his name, studied the process of creativity among scientists. And he, among mathematical scientists, it was very common for them to come down on one of two ways: geometry, so a geometric intuition, or analysis, kind of a breakdown into the equations. But Einstein said neither. Einstein said his creativity was more of the visceral type. So he spoke about what he was feeling in his body. Now, obviously, he was using his mind as well, but you see, he very clearly wasn't split off. His mind wasn't split off from his body. He saw his research as this integral reflection involving the body. Now, since the universe constructed that body, it's not so outlandish to say that the body could come to an awareness of its own dynamics, right? So it was, in a real sense, he was penetrating into an understanding of what was coursing through him. And then he wrote down his equations. And then after he had done that, it was only when they spoke of the expansion that was frightening to him that he changed the equation. So, then one more person who came along was Alexander Friedman, a Russian mathematician. He looked at Einstein's equations and he fiddled with them, and he said, "Whoa! If you take this one term out, they talk about the expansion of the universe." He rushed down to the post office, mailed a letter to Albert Einstein. I mean, can you imagine Einstein's face? Reading this thing from this young mathematician, and so he just threw it away. He did regard it as hopeless. Then you jump down to Hubble, Edwin Hubble. Edwin Hubble looked through the telescope and using the physics of Henrietta Leavitt, he realized that the universe is expanding in all directions. So you have to put together Einstein and Friedman and Henrietta Leavitt and Hubble, and that group represent the small number of people that allowed this new understanding of the universe in. Now, the reason I wanted to tell you this is because their work was fundamental to my study. And a time came when I realized that I thought in the terms of their work. Naturally, you have to. If you want to get on the edge of science. But in that moment, I realized that they had constructed my mind. Not all of my mind, but most of it. And that blew me away. I always thought my mind was mine. But just a moment's reflection, and it's obvious. The words we use were invented by our ancestors, right? The knowledge was put together by our ancestors. And this is this amazing ability of humans to accumulate. Not one of us has a mind that's, only several decades old. All of us have a mind that's 300,000 years old at least. So this I think is, here's my guess. I think that's one of the moves that we need to make in order to approach Noospheric consciousness. The recognition that our minds are a collective, and that each of us is inside of each of us. So then let me go the next thing. I was so thrilled by this. I was massively thrilled. And then so I woke up Denise the next morning and said, I've just got to tell you this. And so we roared down to the Puget Sound. We lived up in Tacoma, Washington. And we roared down the Puget Sound. And the way I was internalizing it was to think of the ancestors like 300,000 years ago. So they are identical to us. No change, really. 300,000 years. And yet their world was so different. And so like for instance, they didn't have the concept of 522. That concept was not part of their world. Right? They didn't have the concept of all men, forget about women for a second, all men are created equal. They didn't have the concept of women should vote. All of these ideas that we live with were absent back then. I'm not saying they were just bereft of qualities. They had fantastic things going on, right? They could hear a bird flutter and know all sorts of things that are going on in the forest. I'm simply saying that in terms of our world with like glass and cars and skyscrapers and medical teams and like stethoscopes and all of that was absent. And I'd tell myself, there are no telephone wires, there are no telephones, there's no Safeway, there's no bread, there's no sliced bread. I would sort of do this as a way of getting into a recognition that our minds are collective. And then so I sat Denise down and I said, honey, the only difference between me and an ancient ancestor is a bag of ideas. I was trying to really make it simple. Just this bag of ideas, that's it. And that's the only thing that separates us. And she thought about it for a second. And, she had that look on her face. I thought, oh, no. I tried to get her to come back, but she knew. But she said, well, for me, what changed me most was giving birth. And she pointed to our son like this so he wouldn't see him like that. And she said, I knew the ideas. Everybody knows the ideas. Humans give birth. But the experience of being pregnant, that's what really changed me. And I instantly recognized she was right. But again, it was this overly cerebral way of living that I had gotten myself into. And I think industrial civilization has in a general sense. But then I could ask that question. Have I ever had an experience of the evolving universe that would be something like a counterpart or an echo of the experience she had of giving birth? And And I'm saying, once again, that would be a direction that I think we are moving in order to reinvent the human species, and in a way that is difficult to articulate now because we're in the midst of it. And now this might be a nice place to reflect a little bit, and before I go to the next part. Does anyone have a good question that I could ask you that would draw people out? Yes?
Where does artificial intelligence play in this evolution?
Yeah, there's a great one. That's a great question. But where does artificial intelligence play in this transition we're talking about? I mean, why don't we just ask several questions? That's a great one. Yes? Where does truth and untruth fit into it? Yes?
Neurodiversity and the changes that are happening in our nervous system and our cognition as people are influenced, I think, by toxicity of our current environment. I think it's changing our
In terms of the neurodiversity?
neurodiversity. So differences in thinking and feeling in development of babies to adults, such that we can have maybe neurodevelopmental differences.
Yes.
Autism or ADHD, but they're creating this sort of new abilities,
Yes.
and new suffering too, folks. So,
That's great. Yeah, all three of these, right here and here.
How is dark matter and dark energy contributing to our growing realization that the universe and the darkness of space is not just a unconscious vacuum?
Yes. Dark matter and dark energy. Yes, sir.
How do we bring about the cooperation of all nations, races, and religions, all peoples, for the betterment of the whole system?
Another great question. Yes, yes. Here and then here.
Yeah, and the idea that this is a new theory that's starting to emerge, that we're living in a simulation.
Yeah,
And what is that simulation about, and how is it being created, and who is creating it?
yeah, yes.
I'm struck by your analogy of the step changes in consciousness.
Say it again?
I'm struck by your analogy of step changes in consciousness.
Yes,
And it's like the monolith in 2001. The apes were suddenly transformed to where they could share knowledge amongst themselves. like
Yes.
you're pointing out.
yeah,
And you're pointing out that there's another evolution coming, and this is our ability to go from our own sharing of knowledge across each other to being accessing a more global interconnectedness of consciousness. And so the question I have for the group is, what techniques what have your experiences been in connecting to that, and what techniques do you use in order to connect to it successfully?
terrific. Ibrahim.
Yes, who is the architect of all of that evolution? Who is the architect, one behind all of this? That's
Which
one.
is similar to it. Yeah,
Okay,
similar.
Second one is there a beginning, and is there going to be an end to all of that, or we are just in eternity? There is no beginning, no end, or was there a beginning or an end? Is there going to be an end to all of this evolution?
Another great question. Yeah, way in the back.
How can we experience the reality that we understand intellectually of the indivisibility of everything?
The indivisibility, the wholeness. Yeah,
How can we experience it, know it, live it?
yeah, yeah. Yes.
How is the human heart being affected by this change in consciousness?
Did you two come together? It's interesting, very similar question. Those are great questions. But yeah, both of you.
How is
Yeah.
the new studies being done by organizations like the Singularity University on gene splicing, nanotechnology, and AI going to affect the way we almost dictate our next step in evolution?
Yes, yes. And then Alphonse.
What I hear you talking about sounds a great deal like what was going on when Copernicus threw the old paradigm out and created the actuality of the sun-centered universe
Yeah,
rather than the earth-centered universe. It's huge. It's
Yeah.
so awesomely revelatory.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, Copernicus seems small now. And that changed the whole world, yeah.
Since science is limited in explaining reality, can only do so much. My question is whether science can still point to the other reality, to the spiritual reality that is beyond space and time.
Yes, excellent, yes.
So, speaking of reality, do we just change reality by redefining it, de-associating to it?
And what is reality? Yeah. Finally, somebody from this side of the room.
I'm very bothered by the immensity of this cosmos. It's 14 billion light years, and the expansion, and it's mind-boggling. And yet, if we're the only life on the planet that we can find so far, it doesn't make much sense to me. You know, everything else seems very rational, very functional. And yet, to make this enormity of planets and galaxies by the hundreds of millions, and we're the only planet with conscious life.
They're finding it pretty.
We can't find anybody else yet?
They're
Why
getting
not?
close.
Well, finally, a question came up that I think I can address. I mean, but I want to say all of the questions that have been asked are my questions. They're all just so deep. But this one, at least I can get at. But, yeah.
You may not know of Michael Levin's work on the bioelectric field.
I am doing.
It has to do with epigenetics. And I guess if you don't know it, it's rather astonishing because it has implications on how we would fit our new evolution together, because it relates to consciousness of cells in the body that interact with DNA.
Wow.
Bioelectric field, just keep an eye on that.
How do you spell the last name?
Michael Levin of Tufts University, that's Levin.
Oh, that's great. Fantastic.
If you don't know it, that's not a good question.
It's a great question, especially because I don't know it. Now I can learn something. Yeah, I mean, asking the right questions is the essential thing. We don't have answers, but all these questions are absolutely essential. But I want to pick up on what you said, because it was my next point. And that is, Ibrahim?
Religion says God created Adam and Eve, created, this universe. And science explains different approach, like the evolution, the Darwinism, all of that. Which one is truth, which one is wrong, and where do they meet, if ever they meet on some point and disagree on other points?
Another great question, yeah. I think what I have to say can provide a context for some of the questions that were asked, a context. Definitely not an answer, but the great statement by Einstein concerning this? He said, we can't solve the problems with the level of consciousness we use to create them, So I think that is such a deep insight. And this is lines up with that a little bit. So see if you like it. Thomas Berry was my principal teacher. And he said, he told me something amazing that relates to all this. And he said, humanity, more or less separated from the rest of the universe, has taken over all of the power words for itself. And by which he meant words like spirituality, consciousness, generosity, love. So that it's not universally true, but the majority of philosophers, excuse me, think along those lines that humanity is the conscious spiritual species, and René Descartes is the starting point for this. He asked the question, brilliant guy, really, really brilliant. He asked the question, do animals have a soul? And then he thought about, he's okay with dogs and cats, He sort of worked his way down, and he was really troubled when he got to the oyster. Yeah. I don't know if he felt bad about eating them if they have a soul. I don't know, but he just that was it. He just no way oyster has a soul. So then instead of just stopping there, he went all the way back up and then said, well, none of them have a soul. They're all just, if they don't feel pain. That was the horrible thing. Oof. Just think of it. All of our factory farms are based on that. So Descartes, soul only went with humans and so forth. But one of the ones that really strikes me is intelligence. So have we captured the word intelligence, and have we put it in prison? And this was one of those big moments. I think it relates to Noospheric Consciousness, but it was in graduate school, and I was studying the evolution of galaxies, and it was fantastic stuff. And but then what blew me away was that I thought we were going to learn, how galaxies evolved, but we got to a certain point, and the professor said, "Well, that's as far as we've gotten." He was a cutting edge scientist, and it says that's as far as we've gotten. I thought, wait a minute, keep going. I want to go. I want the whole story, right? We hadn't figured it out, and then I asked the question. It popped into my mind. What does the word intelligence refer to? Does it refer to Homo sapiens that can't figure out how the galaxy was formed? Or does it refer to the universe that created 2 trillion of them? The universe knows how to create galaxies. Then you have to put knows in quotation marks, because when we talk about knowing something, then we're talking about how humans know something. But I think it's pretty impressive if you know how to construct an entire galaxy that's so complex, this brilliant species can't figure out how you did it. So it's a figure ground reversal that the universe is massively intelligent, and we derive from it. Our intelligence derives from that intelligence, and it's qualitatively different. So the hero in this work, for me personally, is the physicist Freeman Dyson. He died recently. He was a colleague of Albert Einstein at the Advanced Institute at Princeton. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And he made this statement. that relates to what I'm trying to say. He said, the more I study the physical architecture of the early universe, the more I become convinced that in some sense, it must have known we were coming. It must have known we were coming. And so, what does that mean, to know we were coming? And I wanted to ask him, by we, did he mean humans? Or did he mean life and mind? I mean, these things were left open. And so I had a chance to have a face-to-face conversation with him. Was at a conference. I sort of waited for my chance, and suddenly he was sitting on the same couch at a reception, and I didn't want to ask my question too quickly, because then I think he would have just sort of brushed it off. So I kind of wanted to work up to my question on that massively important statement he made for me. And so I asked him what he was like as a child and so forth, and just to get a conversation going. And he told me how he had calculated when he was 5 years old, he had calculated how many hydrogen atoms there are in the sun. I mean, he wasn't bragging. He had a Mozart-like mind, and he was just sort of like, he was telling me because I was asking. But just think of it, right? I mean, like, wow. 5 years old, all right? And, but then this image came to me. By the way, he didn't invent anything new to make that calculation. It was based on a whole string of science. And any physicist can calculate the number of atoms in the sun just using a pencil and paper in a matter of a minute, But he was 5 years old, right? That's the amazing thing. But what came to me was I kept thinking, as he was talking, my mind went to Freeman Dyson as an embryo. So he's an embryo, and then he's born, and he sprouts these little fingers, and then 5 years later he's pushing a little pencil across a piece of paper, calculating the constituency of a star 100 million miles away. I mean, and I thought, he's a fractal. He's a fractal of humanity. We just popped into existence 300,000 years ago. We're on this little tiny planet going around the sun. There are 200 billion stars in our galaxy. There's 2 trillion galaxies. And here we are on a piece of paper. We're talking about the overall dynamics of the whole thing. Like, wow. If that doesn't give you a little insight into why we're here, we're here to allow the universe to reflect upon itself in conscious self-awareness. We're here to enable the powers, the evolutionary powers of the universe, to move forward now, unfurling in part through conscious self-awareness. So it goes back to the Carl Jung point I was trying to make earlier. This stuff is happening, but once consciousness enters into it, it accelerates it. And I think this relates directly to our questions about, what are we going to do? We've got to do something. And we live in a planet right now where a single event, right here, this event right now, quickly becomes planetary. It can go everywhere, right? And so that humans everywhere are thinking about this and wondering about this, and they're finding ways to ignite this awareness that I'm just calling Noospheric Consciousness. But the transition from a modern industrial consciousness into this next phase of humanity could be rapid. I just want to bring that out. Could be rapid. Still working on your question. So here's Freeman Dyson. I finally, we were interrupted, and it has a sad ending. So because people kept coming up to him and talking to him, and so I said, do you like, do you like the whole idea of the anthropic principle and the fine tuning of the universe? And he said, no, he didn't care for that language. And I said, I don't either. Because when you say fine tuning, then you have this tuner. So then you're right back into a dualistic point of view. And so, but just to bring home the fine tuning aspect, why that phrase has been used, that because we know how to look at the birth of the universe, because we can measure how fast it's expanding, we can, at least Stephen Hawking could, ask the question, would it be any different if it hadn't expanded, or if it expanded slowly, or whatever? And what Stephen Hawking found out was that the expansion of the universe is almost exact. There's no wiggle room. If you altered it by 1 part in 10 to the 60th, in other words, if you alter it by a trillionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of 1%, the universe would never develop into the beauty that we see. If you made it just that tiny fraction faster, the galaxies wouldn't form. It would expand too quickly for galaxies to form. If you made it just that tiny fraction slower, the universe would collapse back into a black hole. So we're discovering, I'm saying, we're discovering, now, this is my interpretation, and others. I'm not saying I'm the only one, but there are other physicists who would disagree with what I'm about to say. I just want you to know. This expansion, to me, is revelatory of a form of intelligence we can call cosmological. Now, the other explanation, and I would say that if you took a vote among mathematical cosmologists, the other explanation would win. I just want you to know. The other explanation, and this is certainly Stephen Hawking's favorite, is to imagine that there are an infinite number of universes. And so naturally, if you have an infinite number, one of them is going to expand at the rate you need to have life and mind. The difficulty there is there's no evidence of these other universes. So I don't find it very persuasive. But nevertheless, I think this is part of this. It's a step towards Noospheric consciousness, is to realize that we dwell, we're held by a cosmological intelligence. I'm not saying anything about whether this is related to conceptions of divinity in various religions. I'm just saying it, as opposed to thinking of the universe as a vast empty space. What we're now realizing is this, and this all scientists that look at the matter would agree to. In our universe, the vastness is the smallest space we can fit into. This would be my great take home for you. Okay, let me say it again. Right? In this universe, I've already said, it's expanding at just the rate that would lead to life. Okay, it's expanding at that rate. Now, but what does it take to create life? Well, first of all, you've got to get planets. So stars have to blow up and so forth. And then the simple forms of life have to come on, and they evolve for billions of years until you get to advanced forms of life. So if the rate of expansion is set, and you need something like 10 billion years to create an advanced form of life like humanity, the universe we would discover is necessarily Huge. Are we all together in that? So this turns over the idea that we are this meaningless speck without any direction or relationship to the whole, which was instead, to use another metaphor, that humanity fits in this universe like a hand into a glove, where even though it's trillions and trillions of miles wide, it's cozy for us. We're held by it. So that is this. So going back to Freeman Dyson. So I said, out of desperation, I said, Freeman, do you think there is any connection between the sun and your mind that could calculate the number of atoms in the sun? What's the connection there? And he didn't get my question because people were interrupting him, and he just said, he laughed, and he said, the sun's just a big ball of gas. Massively disappointing for me. So I slunk away, But the next day, as I was driving home, it dawned on me that he had lost the nerve of his own insight. Because, you see, he was saying the universe must have known we were coming. Well, another physicist could have said, Freeman, the universe is just a bunch of quarks and leptons. You see, that could have been a reductionist response to what he was saying. And it showed me again just the challenge of taking in these truths. So if I could do it all over again, I would say, Freeman, wait. What about the Milky Way galaxy? Did the Milky Way galaxy in some sense know we were coming? And I think he would have said yes. And I'd say, well, okay, what about some solar systems? Some solar systems clearly must have known, because our sun must have known. And he'd reluctantly say, yeah, You see, my point is that we're talking about a form of intelligence that isn't human. It's not inhuman, but it's vaster. But I want to finish it with, on this point, with an illustration of how it's a mistake to impose a human mind on the universe. And this would be, it's called the initial asymmetry. But when the universe was in the first instance of its existence, there was so much energy that it drew a massive amount of matter and antimatter out of the quantum vacuum. Okay. I have to tell you what the quantum vacuum is. For those of you that don't know, this is one of the coolest things you're ever going to learn. The quantum vacuum was hypothesized by Paul Dirac in 1928. In a similar way to what Einstein was doing, Einstein was dismayed by what his equations revealed. Dirac was also dismayed because they talked about, and finally Dirac came to see it, they talked about a realm that was pure generativity. And coming out of that realm were what we now call virtual particles. So this too is a major change in our thinking, because we've regarded for so long atoms and elementary particles as the basis of reality. And Dirac was saying, no, there's something more fundamental he called it a sea, and now we call it a field, a quantum field. But it is a realm of pure generativity. In this room right now, it's operating incessantly throughout the whole thing. Particles are coming into existence and collapsing away. The Higgs boson would be something that comes out of, yes. But this is a realm that doesn't, it's not a realm of things, it's a realm of generative power. And it's at the base of our existence. So that I was talking to a mathematical cosmologist, when I was writing this book, and just to make sure I had the interpretation right. And he said, well, the Milky Way galaxy is just an excitation of a quantum field. Wow. In other words, it's like matter then becomes like a flashing reality, right? Just it's churning and jumping and creative. And okay, at the beginning of time, out of the quantum vacuum, for every 1,000,000,001 particles of matter, there was generated 1,000,000,000 particles of antimatter. So that when these two groups got together, they all disappeared into light except for one particle of matter. That means then that the initial universe was 1,000,000,000 times more than what we have now. Now, that isn't the way we would create things. If we were building something, we would just have the right number of matter particles, and we'd build it, But for some reason, no, that's not the way the universe operates. Likewise with life. There have been, 1 billion different species of life. 99% of them went extinct. That isn't how we would do it. What we would do is we'd take clay and we'd fashion Adam, then we'd fashion Eve, maybe some trees or over here or whatnot. I mean, I think Genesis is an important book. I'm not trying to ridicule it. But I'm just trying to say that Genesis, that's exactly how we would do it if we were in charge. But the universe eliminates 99% of life. So in the midst of our trauma and our efforts, I think we do have to take seriously the possibility that out of this destructive moment, there will arise a creative remnant. That's what has happened in the past with life. A creative remnant which gives birth to a new era. And I'm not saying this justifies the destruction, but I am saying there's reason to have an optimistic and hopeful view. I was just going to say that would be a perfect line to end with right there.
So perhaps the universe is evolving in and of itself, and we're just a partial expression of it. That's it. In a moment in time. Yeah, I understand what you mean about being human-specific experience. We're very arrogant in thinking our intelligence can encapsulate something so vast like the multiverse and all the possibilities, but perhaps rather than the universe knowing that we're coming around, we're just an expression. We are the universe, so to speak, at a little aspect of it, in the evolution of it.
Yeah, I don't think I object to is when you use the word just. We're just, yeah. I mean, we're part of the universe, you know what I mean? Like we are, like you say, we're a fractal of the whole thing. We're simultaneously just these little creatures, and yet we are the whole, giving a manifestation of the whole, capable of reflecting on the whole.
Room for possibility.
Yeah.
I mean, we're on a starting point. We're not at an end point.
Just a little starting point. Yeah. Isn't it fun to be a starting point? We're just beginning. Let me give you one little last bit of numbers, then we'll go to you. The average mammal, right? The scientists have figured out that the average mammal lasts 2.7 million years before going extinct. We've only been around 300,000 years. We've got 2.4 million years to go. If we're average, if we're just average, we got 2.4 million years. All right? So start planning.
So with these understandings, how does that help us to live our lives today, now, in this influencing of culture and history and all that jazz?
I can give you a general answer, but working out the answer to your question is the definition of our life and our destiny. So it's naturally opaque. You know, that's the thrill. If I knew, it would take away the great meaning of your life. I don't know. But in a general sense, we can say this, that everyone in this room is aware of the destruction taking place on the planet. It's horrendous, you know? And that you can use that knowledge of this horrendous destruction to free yourself from the forms of consciousness that are generating the destruction. And that is a huge step because we're attached and we're structured by this. So out of compassion for the suffering of so many, we can actually find the energy to deconstruct the maladaptive aspects of our psyches. That's the step. Then as well, by reflecting on the miraculous, if you like, evolution of the universe, by reflecting on it, we can begin to develop some insights as to where the creative energy is surfacing now in our lives, both like personally and in the community. You know, like being part. Evolution takes place in communities, so participating with others that have some resonance. That's really what. And then the joy. The ultimate joy of a human life is conscious participation in the development of this emerging era.
I come from a metaphysical background and scientific position, but also I'm a Kriyaban yogi. And I see that all this pressure on us in today's world is it can force people into our own caves.
Yeah.
So we go down into our own caves, and that's what you do in deep meditative dives into the deep. And that's where you can experience, we cannot intellectually grasp truth, the absolute, the infinite, but you can experience truth and intuitively feel it and feel your wholeness with it, and then that alters how you relate to life and others.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. This was fun.
Yes.
Ibrahim.
Yes, I wanted just to share some experience.
Good.
I come from Mali, West Africa, and I was born in a tiny village, like they say, in the middle of nowhere, about 1,000 people, where everybody knows each other. And maybe I was 6 or 7 years, because it was just before I went to school. So there was a death in the village. In a small village like that, it's not every day that someone dies. So that was my first contact with death. I saw my mom, my grandmom, all of them were crying. And I was, a little boy. I've never seen everybody crying like that, so my heart was beating. Why? Why my mom? Why my grandma? So I was asking my cousin, who was maybe 2 or 3 years older than I am. He said, "Do you know my friend X? It's Demba, actually, yeah? His mom died." I said, "What do you mean by started explaining. He was maybe 10 years old, he was trying to explain, when you die, this cemetery, this place, where we go with our cows, that's where we dig the hole and we put you there, we put you inside. And then I said, who killed her? Who killed him? He said, God. At that time, he was already at the Quranic school. I had not joined there, so he had some information, European, what they teach them at the Quranic school. He said, God. I said, where is God? He said, he pointed out on the sky. I said, I looked like that. It's still fresh in my mind. That is what is the most interesting part. It's still fresh in my mind.
Yeah.
It really has a very big mark on it.
Yeah.
So, and then I said, I don't see him. He said, oh, damn, you think you're going to see him? He's behind the cloud. He's behind the cloud. And I said, that's not. I said, God inspired me certainly, and I took the stick that I had, the wooden stick, because we are nomad, we have cows. We are going to find cows. And I said, Alison, look, I threw the stick on the sky, showing him that the stick is going to come down. How can God be suspended there and not fall? So, he didn't get it. And I said, look, he said, then he said, what? I said, but don't you see the stick came down? It didn't remain hanging. He's still using it. I took this time, the stone that can go farther. I said, look again. And I threw it very far. And then it fell down. I said, you see? He didn't get it. I said, well, how can God be suspended that he doesn't fall? Everything which is on the sky is going to fall down. And then he said, oh my God, you are dumb, so let's go. When he said to me that we all going to die, it really shocked me because I started believing that your mom going to die, your grandma, and I was very attached to my mom and my grandma. They were the biggest one. Imagining that I'm going to be separated from them, I started my hair already. And then from that day on, I think my conscience opened that day. In my first childhood, I was, playing innocent. But from that day, I started suffering, asking myself questions. And then I searched. I would, when they sent me to the Quranic school, I would send a question to the teacher. Of course, they don't like questions. Who is God? Where is God? Then I got an answer. I went to a Catholic school. I was open to go to the catechism. The only small Muslim boy who would go to the catechism. Yes, singing at the choir with them. But also nobody was able to answer my question, where is God, who is God? And then I read about the Buddhism later on, about the Hinduism, and I read about the Baha'i faith also. Because I was searching for the truth. I was very honest. I said, God, show me the light. Whatever it is, that's what I want to be. So I met this Baha'i faith who are, closer to my philosophy. Because they say you can pray in your language. And then Islam says you only pray in Arabic. It didn't make sense to me. Of course, the Christian in the past also used to say that we just pray in Latin. Later on, they tried to be flexible, right? So then I was reading this book of Abdul Baha. He's the son of Baha'u'llah, the prophet of the Baha'i, who is in Haifa, in Israel. I read this book because I went to a Baha'i faith. I was passing by and I saw Baha'i faith. I entered. Is that a religion? They said yes. So as I was always searching, I was bombarding the guy with questions. He said, oh, Ibrahim, I have this book for you that can be very helpful for people. The book is called Some Answered Questions. So he said that can satisfy many of your questions. Then when I went home, I went straight to the question that I'm struggling with, who is God, where is God? And then I go through the subject and then I went to that question. And I melted after the question, after he answered. Because he answered with a question too. He said, how can you comprehend, how can the limited comprehend the unlimited? How can the contained comprehend or apprehend the container? Then I shut you, I melted. I said, well, Ibrahim, finish your journey now. You're not going to be searching anymore. Because you are the limited. And of course, God who fills out everywhere is the unlimited. Of course, you can never. I mean, when you are not connected, when you are not connected to the like subconscious, of course you cannot. While you are conscious, You cannot apprehend God because you are limited and He is unlimited. Just you imagine a bottle, the water which is inside the bottle can never have an image, an idea about what is the outside of the bottle look like. So I wanted to share that experience for me. That day, my journey, my questioning about who is God, where is God, it stopped. And I understood it's a matter of level. Just like when we go to school, the kids who are at the kindergarten, they cannot comprehend what is being taught at the primary level. Same thing at the primary level, they cannot comprehend what is taught at the high school, at the university. So it's a matter of level. Spirituality also is like that. There are degrees. When you reach there, you can connect and melt into the divine version, and then you can experience God. I wanted to share that with you.
Yes.
Tagging on it, I'm thinking about it all day. My grandson just turned 7. When he was 3, he was talking all about this, not just like the 8 planets. It was dwarf planets, then it was black holes, then it was galaxies, and he started to understand the numbers a little bit, how far. And at a very young age, he would do these paintings that you take 45 minutes at an easel to paint, not like little kids where they just, give me more paper.
He was 3?
He was 3 then, 3 and 4. And he wanted to paint the whole solar system, get everything in the right place. But now I sense in him an understanding. It isn't like kids that just want to name the dinosaurs, It isn't more of a sense of the whole thing. Like galaxies don't make his mind wiggle. It's just like, okay, yeah, I get that. Black holes, yeah, and he wants to know how black holes work, and he's always trying to figure about this point of singularity, and he teaches me all the time all this stuff.
Amazing.
But again, as you're talking, that knowledge is available to him. He looks on YouTube videos, and they're not kiddie stuff, and he just kind of gets it.
That's amazing.
But I don't think he's unique. I just know him really well. I'm sure there's a lot of kids that at an early age think that, especially if their parents don't squish them and say, oh, I don't get it, so why should you get it? Which I'm afraid happens sometimes too. But they just.
Well, this morning when I walked out to the car, I had this little child, a 7-year-old, was running after me, and he said, "Can I hold the meteorite? Can I hold the meteorite?" And I said, "Well, do you know what a meteorite is?" And he looks at me like, "It's a meteor that hit the Earth." Not a lot of people know that.
Between asteroids and
Yeah, he was right on top of it. He looked it over, like he'd seen a lot of them, gave it back. The Flynn's test, or what Flynn's, the IQ has gone up steadily for the last 100 years, and there's an example of it. Like, wow, God. Anything else? Yes.
What are you most optimistic about for our future?
I am most optimistic about the Noosphere. So now we go into my own. When I was a kid, going out and looking at the stars, it was deep experience, all right? But I didn't once, as a child, think maybe there are planets out there. I can see the planets, Mars and Jupiter and so forth. But now we know there are 100 billion planets in the Milky Way galaxy. And of these, 320 million are Earth-like, the right distance from the sun. Like, wow. So one of the great hopes of the James Webb Space Telescope is that we're going to identify living planets. It's just, what a time to be alive, So then when I made these, with some others, I made these videos. I was trying to, enter into the world of social media, right? Because I figure all the young people are there. So maybe I'll sneak some cosmology in there, So I made them all, they're 5 minutes long because I know the tension is. But one of them I really liked. It was called the 100,000-year experiment. 100,000-year experiment. Namely, if you follow the humans, when they left Africa, some of them went left and some of them went right. right? So the ones that went left populated Europe, and so the ones that went right swept across Asia into Australia and the Americas. And they met 100,000 years later. And this is something like the first or only or very, very rare for a species not to spread out, diversify, and speciate. We didn't do that. We deepened our connections with each other so that when we met 100,000 years later, it was like, okay, you want to get married? I mean, it was like everything was great, you know? And then for centuries, it was thought that that language, symbolic language, is only developed in, the Middle East and maybe India, maybe China. But now scholars realize that the Mayans developed written language. It's the most beautiful, to look at. I'm not a linguist, but in other words, we went through these developmental stages. If you take hydrogen and you throw it out over here and over here, they will go through, that cloud will go through the same developmental stages. They'll collapse into the first order stars. They'll blow up. They'll create the other elements. You'll have the second order stars. Then they'll have rocky planets. Now, I don't know if there's life in the Milky Way, but I can guarantee you one thing. There's tons of rubies. The steps that lead to rubies, that's real, right? But so here we did this experiment where humans went through this, creating written language, independent of each other. So my hope is in the noosphere. And it's the noosphere, the simplest definition is a unified humanity. A unified humanity. And this movement to unify has been present from the beginning of Homo sapiens. For a long time, we were hunter-gatherers, small little groups. Then we really started to get to know each other. Maybe we were compressed because of hardships and so forth. And we liked each other. We're attracted. We formed villages, then civilizations. And now we have 200 nation states. We're shuddering here in this moment of trying to move to the next level of a unified humanity. And the image I want maybe to leave you with on this, in terms of my hope and so forth, is the James Webb Space Telescope. Because, when I was a child looking up, really, really young, I wasn't like your grandson. It was just like, wow, stars are cool. And, then that must have been something like what the children were thinking 300,000 years ago. But now we develop this telescope. It's 100 times more sensitive than the Hubble. The expansion in knowledge is going to be an explosion. An explosion. I am genetically identical to that guy down there 300,000 years in the past. Identical. And try to go up to that guy and say, look, I want you to imagine the James Webb Space Telescope. Oh, well, all the engineers from all around the planet were involved. The mathematics back through time, all of that was there. And with that, now we're enabling the universe to reflect upon itself in a new way. Why? Why are we so successful with building this incredible technology? Because we were united around a primordial aim, the aim of knowing. It's deeply human to want to know. So we've had these spectacular results. There are other primordial desires. One of them is to educate. Another is to care for. You see, so that as these generate larger unified bodies of humans, We're going to give birth to a very different world. Yes?
In contrast to the great telescope in the sky, the Webb, is the Large Hadron Collider
Yeah.
in Europe. Wow.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's yes.
Speaking of these immensities and these super tiny, tiny, tiny things, the other thing that bothers me about the rationality of the universe is not just the huge spatial, but the time frame and the fact if we're taking the Hubble effect of ever expansion that we are going to go on for billions and billions of years till we have an empty space, there's nothingness, isn't that a horrible waste of time? Which brings me to the next thing, which is an article I saw a few days ago that says that maybe space and time are really illusions and not fundamental. And the fundamental thing is really coming through quantum physics with gravity as the major function, which is a little more akin to perhaps a kind of intelligence. And that goes back to the other thing is you're saying there's only 1 in a billion chances that we have the constant right for life. I agree the multiverse is crazy, but if you have that constant, isn't it saying there's something even beyond the intelligence of the universe that the intelligence has to work on and choose? So are there layers of intelligence?
See, aren't these interesting questions? I know, I mean, really, these are such interesting questions. And that we can ask them is like, wow, what? And I just think of how much, think of the number of jobs in our society that we really don't need, really. I mean, do we really need another video game of people killing each other? I mean, there's so many ways of freeing up the human mind. I would love to pursue those questions. Maybe one last thing, though. One last thing is that when we talk about the future and big, vast, empty spaces and so forth, that is a failure of the imagination. See, I'm trying to emphasize over and over again that the current level of knowledge is unable to say what's coming. That's why I use those examples of a unicellular organism. It doesn't have the power to articulate a starfish, It's just not going to happen. Yes?
I just want to say that everything that you are saying is based on a scientific kind of model is something that sounds a lot like what Eckhart Tolle is saying about consciousness. And that there is a shift going on, and that there is chaos that will bring us to a new order. And I just wanted to say that he's in a whole different realm than you are, but you're talking about parallel things.
Yeah, that's so reassuring that we have, I think things are surfacing in just a million different ways in each of us. And we don't, our time requires the creative imagination. That's what we need to deal with these kinds of questions and so forth. And there's a famous researcher into creativity, Frank Barron, you might know him. He worked at Stanford, he's dead now. But he came up with an amazing result I think you'll all like. He studied creativity among scientists, among business people, athletes. It was a broad range. And he was looking for the commonalities. The most highly creative people, are they all women? But I mean, does race enter in? I mean, how about economics? There's a broad thing. And what he found, the number one commonality was the ability to abide in ambivalence and ambiguity. Isn't that fantastic? It's fantastic. It's because if we can live in that confusion, then multiple avenues and lineages are involved, and they're interacting with each other in our confusion, and they're sorting themselves out. And eventually the light will dawn and we'll get the next step. But the inability to abide in ambiguity, is what drives people to, fixate on ideology, dogma, warfare. For some people, absolutely should not be exposed to ambiguity because it just, tears them apart. And then you, yeah. Yes?
Well, just a thought. Here we are thinking the whole immense universe is just expanding forever and that it could expand into oblivion. An alternative model might be like your lungs. We could be inhaling, expanding for a billion years or so, and then kind of exhaling, and then inhaling, so kind of a never-ending. It's just a model just to keep your ambiguity going here a little.
It's a lovely model. I love that.
Sounds like Brahma.
The here and then here, yeah.
That's great. I was going back to another Stanford professor, Harry J. Rathman, professor emeritus from Stanford. And his conclusion was that the universe is friendly to increasing consciousness.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah.
Say that again?
The universe is friendly to increasing consciousness.
Very, very nice.
Should we applaud?
Yes.
Physical. I mean, our eyes and senses and all the metrics that we use to define science as we know it now is extremely limited.
It's very recent.
So, we're just...
We're just getting going. Remember, 2.4 million years. Now,
No, because it's just going to exhale.
Oh, yeah.
Work with it, you'll like it.
Well, this has been really wonderful for me. And did I miss someone? Oh, we missed one person. The last word comes from.
Well, we've been talking about, these incredible time spans of 14.5 billion years, which to me is nothing. When you have, billionaires that have more dollars than years in the universe, so it's really nothing to me relative to infinity. And an expanding, contracting universe is really nothing but a little tiny speck of nothing in this infinite vacuum, if that's what it is. So, to me, you can reduce, and we're caught in the middle of this thing that seems so huge and immense. And from a scientist's point of view, I'm here studying within the confines of space and time and defining everything, and the universe is out there, but where we come together is when we go into the cave and tap into that omniscience, the field of imagination that accumulated all-knowing that we're all looking for, and that is beyond space and time, and we can tap into that, and that's where these revelations come and these intuitive insights come to all of us who create and come up with new equations and come up with new poems and masterpieces and take us forward. They all come from this other realm of consciousness, and I call it cosmic consciousness.
Nice. Nice. Thank you. Thank you.
My word of the year is awe, and you are awesome.
Well, thanks. See, so are you. So are we. Thanks for coming.
Brian, hey, thank you. You